You've just had a chance to think about the similarity in dynamics in conflicts at different levels. And in his book, Beyond Neutrality, Bernard Mayer suggests that what people want in conflict is actually quite universal. It's a voice, a way of saying what they have to say about the situation, and a sense of justice. It's often vindication, I was in the right, or validation, that was a good job you did. Can be a sense of safety, I've been heard and now I feel safer, or even just a chance for dialogue. Did any of those chime with what you found when you looked at your different levels? Or maybe you came across different sorts of similarities, such as miscommunications that couldn't be sorted out, or struggles over resources, as we were talking about at the beginning. Very, very often you see a similarity, which is that something started small and it grew rapidly, just like the cartoon we've just looked at. And on this slide, we're looking at a conflict spiral, which is a classic way of illustrating the sense of how conflict grows and develops a life of its own. So you can gather allies, you can get more hostile, you can justify what you've been at. Those patterns can be changed, but you need to think carefully about where you're going to start and when. Think about icebergs. What do we know about an iceberg? One of the things that people say is that 10% of an iceberg is above the surface and the other 90% is out of sight. What we're going to think about here is how conflict is so very similar, that what we actually see in the room, what we see people doing, is only a small part of what the conflict really is. On the left then, we have a triangle which shows how the very tip of the triangle is going to be seen, but most of it is out of sight. If we put the conflict spiral next to it, upside down, we see an upside down triangle. The conflict spiral really starts with the behaviours at the bottom, which are very small, but then grows as it goes round and round and round, collecting momentum and speed and filling up with fury. Those are in a sense the same diagram, but upside down. To understand human behaviour in conflict, you have to take into account what is out of sight just as much as what you can see before your eyes. Conflict theorist Johan Galtung was born in Norway, in Oslo, in the 1930s, and he has spent his entire life thinking about peace and peace studies. He was among the first to develop peace journals and to make it a real science, the science of peace that emerged after the Second World War. He's taken this idea of this triangle and he's developed his Galtung's ABC, which is an extremely interesting model for thinking about conflict and what's going on. So up at the top of the triangle, where we can see what's happening, we've got a B for behaviours. Down in the left-hand corner, we've got an A for attitudes. And over in the other corner, on the right-hand side, we've got a C for context. What he said, Galtung said, is that really, with any conflict situation you can think of, all those three different elements are at play. And when you want to start thinking about conflict and understanding conflict, you need to work out what's happening in each corner, and then you need to start thinking about how to work with all or each of those areas. Let me give you an example. Think of two neighbours who've fallen out. They're very rude to each other over their garden fence. That's their behaviours. But where is it coming from? Well, if you take neighbour A, her behaviour may be very rude, but her attitude is, I can't stand music that person next door plays. And I need to get up in the morning because I've got two small children that I'm trying to feed and I can't sleep at night. If you take person B, that person's behaviour is just as rude in its own way, but their attitude is, I live in a city, I'm only playing music and I stop early on. And the context is, I'm young, I'm free, I'm happy, and I'm having a good life, and I can get on and play my music. Understanding how the position looks for each of those people from each of those corners of the triangle can be really helpful when you're trying to think about how to bring them together to talk about what's going on. We're going to build now on that idea that conflict is not only inevitable, but actually really useful at times. Here on this slide, We've got on the left-hand side a model which shows how classic problem-solving techniques happen. We start with the idea of people having conflicting ideas, so the neighbours over noise, for example, and then we all work together as part of a collaboration with a third-party facilitator, or mediator sometimes, to build a creative solution that uses all our ideas. On the right-hand side of the slide, we show how we can use exactly that same process to generate creative solutions. We don't necessarily have to have a problem to start with. We can think of something creative we want to do, say in a community, and we can bring people together and pool their ideas in a respectful fashion, put them all on the table, sort them through together and build on each other's ideas to come up with new creative ways of being. In the Landau's book, they talk about being hard on the problem, but soft on the people. Don't personalise issues. Think about the problem itself as a separate thing. What we need to think about here is the noise.